Welcome to When We're Not Hustling, a podcast where sex workers talk about everything but. I'm your host, Jessie Sage.
Put away the lingerie. I want to know you. Tell me more. I don't care about the news. I'd rather hear about you and see the world from your point of view. The coffee's already made, so I park the sheets, just pull up a chair and tell me more.
When We're Not Hustling is a weekly podcast that explores the lives and identities of sex workers outside of our work personas, our personal philosophies, ambitions, families, relationships, passions, spirituality, and so much more. We talk about our lives beyond the job, asking, what does the flexibility of sex work allow us to do, and who does it allow us to be? On this show, we learn who sex workers are outside of the work we're known for. When We're Not Hustling is an exploration of the people behind the fantasies. When We're Not Hustling is brought to you by Assembly 4. Assembly 4 is a collective of sex workers and technologists working to bring the overall cost of sex work down through their advertising platform, Tryst.link. They also educate clients through the Good Client Guide and provide resources and articles written by and for sex workers. Assembly 4 caters to all genders and demographics and raises funds to fight for sex worker rights and against exploitation in the sex industry. Learn more at assembly4.com. ASSEMBLYFOUR.com. Welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling. I am your host, Jessie Sage. I am happy to be back. This is season 2, and today we're talking to Siri Dahl, which I am very excited about. I want to first share a couple of reminders about what we have going on and how to listen to the show and how to engage with the show. We are on social media on Twitter and Instagram at Not Hustling Pod. We have a brand spanking new website that we love that was created by Black Venom, and it is nothustling.com. You could get all of our episodes there. You can also find out about us as the people who created it. You can also get for other sorts of information, blogs, guest recommendations. We're going to be starting a new newsletter, so please go sign up for the newsletter at nothustling.com. Also, we want to remind you that our episodes come out on Monday and on Wednesday, an after party comes out, and that's where me and the producer Emily and a special guest, we rotate those guests, talk about the episode and what we learned from it. So what you could do is go to nothustling.com and check that all out. We have all of the episodes, all of the after parties, and everything else there. Also, I want to remind you that we have a Patreon, and our Patreon is patreon.com/sapiotextual. If you subscribe for $5 a month, you can get all of the episodes and the after parties a week earlier than what you'll get them on your podcast platforms. All right, I think that's enough for now. We have Siri Dahl on today, and this is a full circle moment. I say this a little bit in the interview, but I started this show, this show, I should say, came out of this short column that I ran on peepshowmagazine.com that was called When We're Not Hustling. And I interviewed sex workers. Guess what? Talking about what they were doing when they're not hustling. And one of the people that I interviewed was Siri Dahl. And I talked to Siri Dahl about weightlifting, powerlifting in particular. And I will link to that in the show notes. It also has some cool pictures of her powerlifting. And I thought, it would be great to have her back on to do it in podcast form, because the entire idea for this podcast came out of those interviews that I did, those written interviews I did, and Siri was one of the main people. So I am very excited to have her back to be talking about the same thing, about powerlifting, but we also talk about her move. We talk about body image issues. Just as a warning, we talk a little bit about disordered eating, and but mostly we're talking about powerlifting and exercise routines and how we relate to those things. So let me give you a little introduction to her, and we will move right into the interview. Siri Dahl is an award-winning multi-hyphenate adult industry personality and entrepreneur. She splits her time between Louisville, Kentucky, and Los Angeles, which is exactly as insane as it sounds. She lives happily with her partner and their 2 black cats. And when she's not being naked on camera or telling OnlyFans subscriber what she thinks of their dicks, she's most likely powerlifting or hyper-focusing on her latest Safe for Work creative project. So let's move right into the interview. All right. Hi, Siri. It's so good to see you.
Hi, Jessie. It's great to see you again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has been a while, probably since the pandemic. Like the last time I think we talked was the pandemic.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. Before I moved into my current place. Yeah.
Did you buy a house?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Are you still in Kentucky?
Which I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's really funny about this show, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud to the show people, but the motivation for this show, or the idea was for this show, was that tiny column I did in the Peep Show magazine for a while that you were in, that was called the same thing. It only ran a little bit, but I was doing the same thing, talking to sex workers about what they're not doing what they're doing when they're not working. And I did one on you about powerlifting. And suddenly in season 2, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have you back on to do this again.
I love it. It makes me so happy. It's like such a full circle moment.
I know. And the funniest thing is you were so gracious, but we had that whole conversation and I lost the file. And do you remember? And
vaguely, yeah.
Okay,
it's not the first time it's happened. Like,
okay, this is what happened. We had this whole conversation.
Yeah.
I record it, and then somehow it got saved in the wrong place, and I couldn't find it because I am not the most like organized with like data management. And suddenly I was like, I have no idea where this file is or what it's called or how to access it. And then PJ was like, hold on, let me help you. And I was like, no, don't say anything, because I have a good memory for conversations because I like care about conversations. So I was like, no, don't talk to me. Don't do anything. And I went to the couch and I spit out like the interview as I remembered it, like every word, and sent it to you. And you were like, actually, this sounds like what we said, except I think you changed a couple of like powerlifting words because those weren't ready at hand.
Yeah. I remember it that way as well. There was just like a couple minor like nitpicky things that I was like, well, Powerlifter would say it this way, but you know, yeah.
But that was the only thing that's the only time I've done that, where I was like, no, you can't say anything to me because I need to remember this thing. And then I was just like, Siri says this.
That's amazing.
So
I could never.
I can't believe I did that. That was like the weirdest thing, but it turned out it worked out fine. So it's fun to actually have you in your own voice, not the voice I remember, talking about your thing. So can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Siri Dahl. I'm an adult film performer. I've been doing that professionally since, oh my God, I guess it's been 12 years now. I started in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So been a veteran performer for a while. And one of my longest lasting hobbies, which says a lot, I am a Gemini and I have ADHD. So I am a hobby hopper. But one of the ones that I've stuck with for the longest time is powerlifting.
That's so cool. I love that. I've never, so when I was in college, I was a rower. And so we had to do some of the powerlifting things when I did that, but I've never done it just on its own. And I always have this idea that like, it's something that would be great to get into. And I'm also have ADHD. So I have a lot of ideas of things I'm going to get into that I never get into. But tell me what your motivation for that was and like why you've stuck with it for so long.
My motivation originally, because I found powerlifting, as its own sport that I became dedicated to just by way of having interest in like strength training generally. And I got into strength training because I wanted to get more fit. This is going back to like 2012, like shortly after I started my career in adult. I wanted to gain some muscle. I wanted to feel like more confident in how I looked. I
Mhm.
wanted to feel healthier and more
Yeah.
athletic. And I had never really had, I mean, other than like for like little short stretches of time, I never like really had a committed gym routine in my
Mhm.
life. Like I didn't I didn't play any sports growing up. Like I never
Yeah.
played team sports. I did martial arts, so that's like a sport, but it was, it's
Yeah.
just different than like basically I just had like very little background in any athletic pursuits of any
Mhm.
kind. Anyone listening who's ever done martial arts, I specifically did like American karate and Kenpo karate all through my adolescence up
Mhm.
until I was like a senior in high school. Um, so I just like didn't know anything about the gym. And when I first started going to the gym, just had like these very like general goals for myself. I was
Yeah.
just doing a lot of, you know, like just using the machines that I saw in
Yeah.
the gym.
Mhm.
Um, or doing cardio machines, or like
Yeah.
there was a time when I did like workout tapes. You remember those like Jillian Michaels like
Yeah.
burn at 90-degree burn. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like I tried a lot of different things is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. I tried a lot. I bought a class, like a fucking Groupon to a Zumba class. And I was like, I'm never embarrassing myself like this ever again. So I was on the hunt for something that felt sustainable that I wanted to continue doing.
Yeah.
And the first time I really ever felt that was when I just started really committing to strength training. And I found that like, machines at the gym, those are fun for like, if you want to work a certain muscle group. But what I
Yeah.
really fell in love with was like barbell movements.
Mhm.
And like anything involving free weights, really.
Yeah.
That was kind of where I started to find that it felt like almost like I was a little bit addicted to it. Like it
Oh,
just
okay.
hit different than anything else that I'd
Yeah.
tried.
Mhm.
And
What do
that's
you
what
think
led me
about it?
to
Like, you think
powerlifting.
it was the movement or the fact that you were feeling stronger, or what do you think really connected to you?
Um, I think, well, specifically with barbell movements, because that's everything that powerlifting is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think for me, a big part of it was if you contrast like it coming from the background that I came from, right? So I didn't play high school like team sports. So I
Yeah.
never had set foot. I'd never been told how to use a barbell. No one
Right.
had ever showed me how you do a bench press.
Yeah.
So coming from like literally zero amount of knowledge, and at first I was self-taught,
Mhm.
meaning like some I had used the resources available to me on the internet.
Yeah.
Specifically, at the time back then, there was this subreddit that was specifically for like women who
Oh,
are
cool.
doing
Mhm.
fitness related
Mhm.
things, and it was a very good, like very progressive group of women. Like I mean, they called it women, but they're open to. You didn't have to be a cis woman to
Yeah,
join the
right, right.
group. So I really
Yeah.
liked that group, and I started out by like just reading the resources shared by women who were like competitive powerlifters who were members of
Mhm.
this group. So that gave me like kind of a, probably a better than
Mhm.
average starting base with when I had no prior knowledge.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would take like little video clips and put them in this private group to get like feedback on my forums.
Oh, okay.
So it
Uh-huh.
was kind of this like very low level coaching situation because it
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
they were just being nice and doing it for free, but they weren't
Yeah.
like actually a coach for me or anything. And that's kind of like helped me at least get my bearings at first. And then the more serious I got about it, then I got a membership to a gym where I live that specializes in strength sports. And that was like the
Mhm.
first time that I had a real coach.
Mhm.
And then it's just been a journey of like getting more and more into it since then. Although what's ironic maybe about this conversation is at this point in my life currently, I am like the least serious about powerlifting that I've been in a while.
Oh, really?
And well, yeah, and I mean that like
Is
I
that because it's just kind of been integrated and you don't have to think about it as much?
I think, well, I mean, to a degree, that's part of the mental part for sure. Is like, I don't like, I feel like I've proven a lot of things to myself that I didn't
Yeah.
ever expect that I would be able to anyway years
Yeah.
ago. So
Mhm.
I've lightened up a little bit. Like, I don't put
Yeah.
so much pressure on myself to like
Mhm.
keep achieving better numbers.
Right.
Um, But another part of it is just like over the last like 2 years, I've had a couple random injuries or like health things that got in the way of training. So I've lost a ton of strength, and I've had to kind of like deal with, that's a whole other mental struggle, like knowing what I used to be able to lift in 2021, and then
what you can do now.
What I went into the gym today and did, which, you know, makes me want to cry a little bit, but I'm still doing it, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting what you said, though, in terms of proving things to yourself. So not feeling as the same sort of motivation. I've noticed that in myself, too. And there's been like not with powerlifting, obviously, but with like other things where I was motivated for a long time, like, and felt very ambitious about certain things that, like, as they've gone along and as I got like more success in them, was like, feeling less ambitious about, like, I don't really need to do this as much anymore. Like, I know that I can do this. I don't need to prove anything to like other people, but also probably more to myself. And it's funny because we had my mom on the podcast recently, and she said something like, the older I get, the less like, I don't want to work as hard anymore. And I think there's like something, there feels like there's something to that. And I'm not sure how to feel about it, because I feel like I'm only at the beginning stages of like feeling like, you know, I don't know how much energy I want to put into something. I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. It's like, I didn't actually mention this yet, but, you know, after I got my first powerlifting coach, which was like a group coaching situation, it was very personalized, but there was like a group of like 7 people or something that we'd all meet up a couple nights a week, and we had the same coach. So that's what I did for a year and a half. And then eventually, when it was affordable and I felt like it was a good investment, that I was serious enough about lifting to really want a truly personal coach. Then I hired the coach that is now still my coach. And his name is Dr. Dave.
Dr. Dave?
He is a doctor. He has a PhD in I don't remember what, but it's powerlifting related. So I love him. He's great. If anyone wants to follow him on Instagram, he's Dave at Ops.
OPS?
Dave at OPS. Although I remember it as Dave A Tops, because that's what it looks like when I read it. Or Dave A Tops, like he's a dinosaur. Dave A Tops.
Dave A Tops. Yeah, that's good.
That's my coach, Dave, and I love him so much. He's like just this a ginormous man, and he's also just like the most jovial guy. Like, so, and that, honestly, I think that like having a really good coach, like a very good match personality wise, is also for me a big part of the joy that I get out of lifting. So the way that works, since he lives like way across the country, is, you know, whenever I lift, I videotape my like main sets at the gym, and then I just send him, I trim the clip so he just sees like the actual lift, and then I send that to him in our little text chat.
Lucky you have these skills like from your other work.
Exactly.
Do all this video editing for your powerlifting.
It's actually super convenient that I have to tape my sets for my coach anyway, because now I just have like a giant library on my phone of like lifting videos, and sometimes I repost those on like my OnlyFans or like on public social media, because my fans also really like watching my lifts.
Double dip where you can, going back to like not wanting to work as hard.
But kind of back to your last question, I totally relate to that. The thing that like your mom was saying before is like, you know what, I don't need to like try so hard this time. Like I've had so many of those moments lately because like I didn't use a coach at all. Like I completely had to step away from powerlifting. What was this? Like around November 2023.
From injuries?
November 2022, actually. Like, it's been like a long road. I had TMJD that got so bad that I couldn't do anything. Like I literally couldn't do anything. Like I was having like shooting nerve pain. TMJ, like lockjaw.
Oh, wow.
I had a terrible case of lockjaw. I couldn't even open my mouth farther than like half an inch. I could barely eat things that required chewing. It was awful. And I just had it was causing all this referred nerve pain in my upper body. Wow. So like in my chest, kind of like in my armpits, it was real weird. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make it better. And like, funnily enough, like no doctors had any good suggestions at all. There's just like nothing they can do. Wow. Ultimately, a totally unrelated suggestion is what helped it the most. And that was, my dentist told me I should get Invisalign.
Oh my gosh, really?
Because my bottom teeth were like a little crooked. Like I was supposed to get braces on my bottom teeth when I was a kid, and I just never did it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so did the Invisalign work?
Yeah, that's the funny thing is like I had asked my dentist before, and the only thing that anyone could suggest that was any help at all was like getting Botox injected in my masseter muscles, which I've done several times now for years. But even after that, like the only thing that helped a lot was getting Invisalign.
That's so weird. I would not think that the alignment of your teeth would matter that much in this.
I wouldn't either, but I think, it makes sense in retrospect. Like, okay, the reason I think it helped a lot is because the way I got such bad lockjaw in the first place is because I do not grind my teeth, but I grit my teeth. I clench my jaw all the time. Mm-hmm. When I'm awake, when I'm asleep, when I'm focusing about something, when I'm relaxed, I still clench my jaw. It is just like the way that my body wants to exist. Yeah. And having to wear these plastic things on my teeth for like a year, every single day, all day long.
That's so interesting.
Just created that little barrier where like I couldn't clench my jaw as hard. It just like wasn't successful. So slowly my lockjaw started to improve. And now I still kind of have symptoms sometimes, but it's not nearly as bad as it was. I can open my jaw all the way. Like I can eat.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it totally
missed that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just lucky for me, I guess, that it worked out that way. And so as that started to get better, then there was a totally other unrelated injury. Is like I went on vacation in April, a year ago, April, not this most recent April, and tripped and fell in some mud while I was hiking, and that it totally like blasted all the cartilage in my left knee.
Oh my god!
So then I couldn't do. Yeah, then I was like unable to do. Even though the lockjaw was getting better, I still couldn't do any like real barbell movements.
Right.
I mean, I could kind of bench and I could kind of deadlift, but it was sketchy to do a deadlift, and I could not squat at all. I couldn't do anything that involved like
bending,
bearing weight and bending my knee. Yeah. So I basically
Did you get surgery?
No, it wasn't the kind of injury that would require surgery. It was basically the cartilage in my knee was so bruised that it had to just have a lot of time to like heal the scar tissue and rebuild the collagen, like the cartilage. So I saw like a couple different doctors and eventually an orthopedist, and essentially the orthopedist was like, well, you can just do like a lot of hyaluronic acid and collagen supplements and just like take all the joint supplements, stay really hydrated, and your body, your knee should start to get better in like 9 months to a year.
Oh, nice.
It's just because there's no blood flow to your cartilage in your knee. Like it takes so long. Yeah. So
I used to be a marathon runner, and when in my 30s, I did it like really hardcore for like 5 or 6 years and did all kinds of races, and my knees and my hips are like all messed up now. And I have like a bone spur on my knee. Like my knee like sticks out, like there's a bone thing on there. And I recently started doing, I'm not doing it right now because I fell out of it, but I should get back in it. Physical therapy for my hips because my hips were hurting so bad. And when I went and had them x-rayed, they were like, oh, you have like bone growths over the socket. So a lot of time, like when you think that like you're not flexible, it's not like a muscle thing. It's that it's like hitting that bone and you can't like go beyond that. And they're like, well, we'll just strengthen the muscles around it. There's not much we can like do. And they didn't say it's from running and training like that, but I don't know. I'm not so sure that it's not.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't take it back because I like like we were saying earlier, actually, like I got so much out of that, like in terms of my own, I don't know, meeting goals that I set of things that I thought I wouldn't be able to do. And then I did them. But then after doing them for a number of years, there was one point that I started something else that was also hard. And I was like, all right, I'm done with that. Like, so I was like, I can only focus on one big thing at a time. And I was like, my running time is over, but I'm so glad I did it because now I know I can do something else that's hard. I don't, there was something about it that felt like that.
No, I totally get that. I mean, for me, a lot of my love of powerlifting has been like, you know, blowing away my own expectations of myself and what I'm able to do. And I just, it's, you know, a huge part of it is like the way that it's changed my self-perception. Like I remember being in high school or in college, like my late teen years, early 20s. And kind of, I just remember I had this feeling that I was like, man, I feel like I missed something. And, you know, because of the fact that I didn't play sports growing up, like I felt like there was this missing piece. And it was just this sense that I had of like, I know I'm supposed to be like an athletic person. I know that I'm supposed to want to move my body in a certain way. And I want that for myself, but I just couldn't find anything that felt comfortable. I tried to be a swimmer. I tried to be a cyclist. I tried to run. Like I tried things and nothing stuck. It like, you know, the thing I remember about trying to be a runner, and by trying to be a runner, I mean, like, I would train 5Ks and then I ran a couple 5Ks, and by ran I mean mostly walked. Like I'm just not cut out to be a runner. But the thing that made me not want to run more than anything is like it made me feel lonely.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And that's funny to me because powerlifting is a lonely thing too. Like I'm not. I mean, I do have friends at the gym. It's just like the people that are always there that I see. So we like wave at each other and we chat for a minute. But it's like I'm still like doing my list on my own with headphones in. I guess maybe just the sound, like the chaos of a big warehouse gym environment, like works for my brain. I liken it to like if I'm writing something, I do better setting up in a coffee shop. With the background noise than I would in my own house in a quiet room. So that's kind of, I think of my lifting like the same way. I just do a better job. I feel more like on task when I'm in a big fucking gym surrounded by other people doing their own thing as well.
Thankfully, when I was doing marathoning, I had two friends that I trained with, and we would do it by ourselves during the week. But then on Saturdays, we would get together and do our long runs, especially when we were training for marathons. And so it felt very social to me because it was like, it was almost like therapy where like once a week you would see these people, you'd only see them on that day. And then you would catch up on like everything that happened during the week, and it would make the runs go by because you're like, and then what happened with your coworker that you were telling me about next week? And then you share all the stories and then you're done. And that was always really nice. And I felt very close to those people because we had that like shared project. But but I can understand why it would feel lonely because it is a very individual sport. Yeah. But you're right. Powerlifting is too. It's just a different environment.
Maybe also I'm like, I did do a couple like group run things, like way forever ago when I like lived in Austin for a little bit. And I mean, maybe I would have had more fun there socially if I were capable of running and actually talking while I was running. But no, I'm just like constantly out of breath. Like, no, I needed to go to like 50 run meets before I would get to the point that I could have a conversation.
I get that. Yeah. I couldn't do it now. I'm like, there's no way I could do it now. But at the time I was able to like chit chat and run 15 miles at the same time. Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my God. I can't even imagine.
So talk a little bit more about how it changed your relationship to your body.
Oh, like in really huge ways, because I remember when I started my career in adult, I kind of think that this is something that everyone deals with. It's just our culture does this to all of us. Is like I had dealt with body dysmorphia when I was growing up in my adolescence. It was still very much present when I was in my 20s, well into my 20s. And ironically, having a career in adult and, you know, having my naked body visible all over the internet actually helped that a lot more.
Helped it for me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to present this in a way that it's like very clear to listeners that like, it's not that having a career in adult made me more insecure about my body, because it actually made me a lot more comfortable with a lot of things about my body.
Yeah.
So I was fine with the way I looked. And then when I started having a more and more successful career, I started to appreciate more things about my body. And it wasn't out of like a dislike for my body that I wanted to change or become more athletic. It was more that like, I actually felt this validation from my own fan base that I didn't really expect to get from
That's so interesting.
outside. And it sort of, it made me feel like empowered to actually like that little nugget that I mentioned that I felt like, oh, this thing is missing. Like I want to be more athletic. It made me feel more empowered to actually pursue that. So that was kind of the basis of like really getting into strength training. Cause I remember trying to go and like lift at my college fitness center when I was like 20 years old and barely being able to focus and like feeling really uncomfortable and like just feeling stupid because I was like, oh, people are watching me. Like, I don't know how to use this machine. Like I'm doing this dumbbell movement weird.
Right.
Or like, I look so weak when I'm doing it. Like I was very self-critical about those things. And it made it harder for me to feel like committed to the routine. So in a weird way, like having this validation from my own fan base on my career helped me feel really empowered. Like, no, you know what? Like, I fucking got this. Like I can do whatever I want.
Too.
And
like they think it's cool that you're doing it.
Yeah. So that helped hugely. And it kind of just became a case of like, the more time I spent in the gym, the more serious I got about strength training. And then eventually, you know, hiring a coach and getting into real powerlifting, the more also just like seeing the progress, you know, like there's a real truth to like beginner gains. This isn't like almost any strength sport. Especially it's true with powerlifting is like, you will see a pretty swift improvement when you're new to it. And that's just because your body isn't used to this method of training. So you have strength gains that compound really fast. And so in my first year at powerlifting, the weights that I was lifting, I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy, you know? Like after 1 year of training with my first coach that I had, I still have not beat those numbers. Like my squat, my bench, and my deadlift,
first year
1 are still the heaviest lifts I've ever done.
Wow,
which is a little bit like, yeah. I know, and that's so it's fun because it's just like when I say like those beginner gains are no joke.
I think coaches make such a big difference because that's how I got into long distance running, because I used to be a English language trainer. So I would go like do business English for a bunch of different like expatriate assignees who came into the big corporations in Pittsburgh. And I would go to the employees' houses and also work with like their spouses and their kids and just offer one-on-one language training. And then this Brazilian woman who was like in amazing shape, who wasn't one of the employees, but like was friends with this other Brazilian family I was working with, called me and was like, oh, I would love to just pay you for lessons. Like, can I do that? And I was like, okay. Like, and we started talking about it. And then she said, well, I'm a personal trainer, so I have really flexible schedule. And I was like, wait, what? Like, you don't have to pay me. Why don't we do like an exchange? And working with her. Yeah. I mean, I miss these days because we became really good friends and we just kind of started doing like the language training while working out. And then like it became this great thing. And I got in such great shape at that point because I had this person who was like super invested in that and helped me meet like all these goals. And I don't know, I think a good coach she's back in Brazil now, unfortunately, but I think that like a great coach is so important if you're trying something new that you don't know how to do, because it does give you a lot of motivation and accountability and skills.
Yes. Yeah. Especially the accountability. I will say like, over the last like year and a half, when I, basically I mean, I still would like lift now and again, but I was doing like very lightweight, like mostly, accessory movements. So and you know what? I haven't even established yet in the conversation specifically what powerlifting is.
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
I'm sure anyone who's listening like has no idea. Maybe they've Googled it by now, but basically powerlifting, the goal is to lift the heaviest weight for one repetition, like a one rep max, the heaviest weight that you can, one rep. And powerlifting is exclusively squat, bench press, deadlift.
Oh, 3 exercises.
Just those 3 lifts. Yes.
I did not know that.
All of the training is around maximizing your strength to pull or push the most weight that you can for this one lift.
Interesting. Yeah.
So during that time that I had to take off, when I was like, almost 18 full months that I could not squat, I could barely bench. I couldn't really deadlift either.
Yeah.
I was still training as much as I could reasonably, but I was really having to adjust a lot. So I was just doing a lot of accessory movements. That is, I couldn't do a squat, but I could do certain like modified versions of lunges and things like that.
Okay.
As my knee started to regain mobility and like my collagen was coming back. So I was still doing the training that I could, but I had to take a lot of time off, and I let go of my coach for like a year, at the point that I realized like, oh, this injury is really serious. Like I can't really train the way that I was. So what's the point in like paying a coach every month to create a program that I can't follow? So I let go of my coach for a year. And I just started back with my coach, Dave, that I previously mentioned this past January. And that was like a big deal for me. I was like, oh my God, hallelujah. I can hire Dave again, And of course he was more than happy to have me back. And I've just brought that up because you mentioned the accountability part of having a coach. And I struggle so much with, I think it is a little bit of the like, just my personality. And I know for sure it's also a little bit of that ADHD perfectionist quality that I struggle with, which leads me to want to just do everything on my own.
Me too.
I've always struggled with that. It's like, I have this thing where I'm like, I shouldn't need anyone's help. I shouldn't need any like input, blah, 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 blah. And so it's been really fun.
I don't know if I'm like
me.
that or if I'm just like, I want to do it by myself.
And it's one of the things that I've learned about powerlifting, like that it's and doing it on my own is like so much less fun.
Thank you for listening to When We're Not Hustling. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Doing so will help other people find us. And if you're a sex worker who wants to come on the show and talk about your life outside of work, we would love to have you. Please send an email with more information to nothustlingpod@proton.me.
One, it's potentially dangerous. If I hadn't hired a coach when I did, because the first coach I ever hired was in like 2018. And I hired them at the time because I realized I was getting serious enough about powerlifting. Like, I should probably like check myself before I wreck myself and like really make sure that I am doing these things right. And at that time, it's good because the coach that I hired back then did have some tips about how I could like be doing things, having better form, to prevent injury in the future. So it's been a little bit of a humbling thing for me to like have a coach being like, But that accountability piece remains like a huge, huge, huge part of it for me. When I'm exhausted, it's like this last couple of weeks, Kentucky's been a fucking swamp. Like literally we're talking, when I worked out on Monday, I had to go squat, and my gym is just a warehouse. It was probably about 90 degrees indoors. There's no AC. The humidity out here is like 80%.
It's so bad.
They just have the giant ceiling fans, the ones that are like 20-foot diameter, which those are great. But it's still fucking hot as balls. And so it's like in that environment, I am so tempted, I'm like, okay, I got to do like X amount of sets of squats at this weight. And then in my head, I'm like, it's fine. I can skip like 2 accessories that I'm supposed to do today. Like I'm too tired. I can skip it. But no, and even if I'm not recording and sending a video of that particular exercise to my coach, I mentally know, I'm like, yeah, but the program he sends me next week is going to be based on my completion of what I do this week. And it just keeps escalating. It's progressive overload. That's the goal with all of this. You want to keep getting strength. So the accountability portion is really important because I'm both for my own, like my own pride, you know, I'm like, I want to know that I can do it. And also just knowing that it's going to ruin me if I don't do the shit I'm supposed to do this week.
Yeah, right. The it's just going to make it harder next week. So you might as well go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My cousin,
and you know, without even getting to that, I'm like, I'm paying this person how much per month? Like, let me actually do the fucking program they're giving me.
There's that too. Yeah. You know, I have a cousin, actually it's like PJ's cousin, but who got into powerlifting, and she started off just thinking that she was going to do like powerlifting, like just the exercising, but then she also quit drinking. She changed her whole like diet. It like changed her life dramatically. And then now I think she's moved down to like closer to where her coach is. I don't exactly know where that is, but living with kind of in community with other powerlifters. So she got like really into it, but it changed a lot about her, like her other habits. Did it change your, like, did you get into like eating differently, or how has that impacted the rest of your life?
Yeah, it has. Honestly, the way that it's altered my relationship with food, I think has been one of the most beneficial aspects for me. I have never like really struggled that much with food, but I do think, and you might want to put like a trigger warning on this. I'm not sure. One of the things that I think of as like an early mistake of mine when I started getting into fitness, my own like pursuit of fitness around like 2013 is, this is also like the early era of like fitness influencers on Instagram, you know, and I had a couple friends and adults who were working with this like nutritionist who was giving them like eating plans to, you know, lose body fat or gain muscle. Right. And so I didn't actually hire this person, but I sort of like paid attention to what they were doing. And it was like, so all I'm going to say, I don't want to get into too much detail, and I don't want to like, you know, make it a whole like upsetting thing. But there was a stretch of time where I was like tracking macros, I was tracking calories, and I was doing like a very high protein diet, which that is good. 2 thumbs up for high protein. Yeah. But I was probably eating 1,200 calories a day.
That is not a lot. No.
And that is not enough. Like, it's just not. I'm sorry. For any adult, like of any gender, that's actually not enough.
Especially not if you're exercising all the time. I can't like,
it just, you can't sustain that at all. Right. And it's not really healthy. I think there's so many myths in like the fitness industry about what is acceptable or good. Yeah. And there's not enough honest like information out there about, especially when it comes to diet, because that's for a lot of people who are, you know, whether they're someone just is trying to get more healthy, or whether they have specifically like a weight loss goal, or even if they want to gain weight, like diet and nutrition is something that a lot of people really struggle with. Yeah. And so I've been there as well. And I think the most important thing that powerlifting did for me is it reframed a lot of that piece for me. Mm-hmm. When I started lifting, everything became about maximizing my strength in this sport. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't still a good stretch of time when I was like really getting into my initial training powerlifting, those like the first year or so, I was still tracking macronutrients, which is I
don't even know what that means. Like I've heard people say that, but I don't like get it. What does that mean?
Macronutrients are carbohydrates, fats, protein, and technically also alcohol is a macronutrient. Alcohol has a calorie value per gram. People never talk about it because for whatever reason, this country doesn't require you to like display calorie count on alcoholic beverages, but alcohol is a macronutrient. It's just one that has like literally no value. It's just like,
Is that making you feel silly? You know, if that's about.
It has a get lit value, and that's about it. But so that's your macronutrients, and then like you know, there's micronutrients, which are like the little ones on the nutrition label.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But the macro is like, that's the basis of like nutrition. That's the stuff that you need to have enough of every day to like, to be healthy, for your body to be happy and functioning normally.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So how do you, was it helpful to count all of that, or you think it was nice when you let go of that just to?
I was so used to it. So I'd already been through so many stretches of time where I was counting it because I was primarily trying to, for example, lose weight or just be aware. Like, because a big thing a big thing with, if you look at any like personal training program, a lot of the time, one of the first steps is like, they want you to keep a food diary. And it's not necessarily to limit your intake of calories. It's to be aware.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't know what you're actually putting in your body, it's really hard. It's very hard to underestimate, it's very easy to underestimate.
Yeah.
Especially when you're me, because I get very snacky at night. Yeah. I just want to eat all the snacks.
Yeah.
So what changed my relationship with food so much was everything became about the protein when I started lifting. Mm-hmm. I was like, what's the point of doing all this training and powerlifting with the intention of doing the heaviest squat I can possibly do if I'm not ingesting all the protein I need for my body to actually efficiently build muscle.
Right.
So I kind of switched into a phase where I was still tracking my macros every day for like, for like a year and a half. I was like religious about it every day. Wow. But I wasn't tracking calories, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think especially a lot of women, like, you think of calories in, calories out, like all this shit that we're taught. Right. And I just like took the part of it that I wanted and left the fucking rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, I don't give a shit about the calories, but I do give a shit about getting 180 grams of protein every day. And I'm going to make sure that happens.
Right, right.
And it really reframed my relationship with food and just my body in a lot of ways, because I started to really view this as, this is fuel for my body, and I'm not restricting anything. Like, I was like mindful about like, because I knew how much protein I was trying to get in my body in a day. Right. Protein takes up a lot of space. Like if you haven't tried eating 160 or 180 grams of protein a day, and you just start that, like you're not going to feel hungry. Like it's just like you're constantly stuffed because protein takes the longest time for your body to break down and process. Right. So it keeps you feeling full longer.
And I think in our culture, like in our food culture, it's actually hard to get protein.
It's not. So it's like, there's actually a really good, I don't remember the name of the episode, but the podcast Maintenance Phase, which
never seen that. I've never listened to that, but I've heard of it.
Oh, I love that podcast. I mean, most of what they do is just kind of debunk diet and fitness industry myths. Okay. Mm-hmm. But they did have a really good episode. I believe it was one of their bonus episodes on Patreon. That's about the protein myth, or it's called something like that. And it's that there is kind of a misunderstanding that people like don't get enough protein. I think. I mean, I will say there's a very big difference between like the amount of protein you need to like sustain life and be a functional person and your like brain function and all that versus like the amount of protein you'd want to be eating if you are a competitive strength athlete.
Right. Yeah.
So like no one needs 180 grams of protein a day. Yeah. To survive.
Right.
But me, because I want to deadlift 400 pounds, like I do want that 180 grams of protein a day. So it kind of reframed my relationship with food because I was thinking of it in terms of like, okay, well, I have this overarching goal of like, I want this much of this kind of food.
Yeah.
And now I know there's only limited amounts of space that I can actually like chew and eat all this food. So now I'm going to think twice about like, drinking if I'm going out with friends. And I don't not drink. Like I've never quit drinking. I actually really love craft beer, but I think about it a little more strategically. Like, it's like,
too.
Yeah. There's times that I am like, no, I don't want to have alcohol in my body. Like it doesn't, it's not like, I mean, a good example is like, sometimes I have to lift like late at night. Sometimes I just, for my schedule, like I can't make it to the gym until like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And if a friend's inviting me out for drinks at 7, I'm like, no, like,
yeah. It's going to make it much
drink
harder.
alcohol immediately before I lift. Like that would be insane.
Right.
I've seen people do it, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. That's what I found when I was doing marathon training is like the hard thing about it, which is why it wasn't sustainable past like the point of my life that I totally focused on it, was that it wasn't just like going out and doing it. It was like all of the time beforehand that I had to arrange my life around these long runs and make sure that I didn't go out and that I got enough sleep and I got enough water and I ate the right kind of foods. And then I would go and do it. And then it would take like a day and a half to recover. So I'm like, this one run is taking like 3 days of prep and recovering, which
it does. And the older you get, this is what I'm learning now. Oh, by the way, today's my birthday.
Oh my gosh, is it? Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm officially 36 as of today.
Oh, nice.
And just on this subject, my body loves to find new ways to remind me of all the shit that I'm doing wrong as I get older.
Yeah.
And like a good example is, I squatted on Monday. Things went great. Had a great time, great gym session. Then right before I went to bed on Monday night, which is, now it's been like 8 hours since I finished my workout. I was just like fucking around in the kitchen. I was probably like being weird. I like turn into a little gremlin, like, and bother my partner at night. Like, I think I was just acting goofy to make him laugh. But I was like squatting down, doing something weird on the floor. And I felt like in my hip, kind of like a weird, like, and it was just like, I just did something too fast in the slightly wrong direction. And then I woke up later that night at like 4 a.m. with like just crazy shooting pain in my leg. And so it was like my IT band had gotten like sort of strained. And it's fine now, but it's like one of those things where I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that shit would never have happened when I was like 27.
Yeah. I'm 46. I turned 46 in March. So I'm 10 years older and it just does not get better.
Yeah. I'm just like, all right, we're just going to, between that and the cartilage on my knee, just when I was hiking, like how many times in my life have I taken a fall or a slip where I just like went directly on my knee and I've been fine. And that one time, then my body was like,
yeah. Yeah. So it does. You just like recover less fast.
Which is honestly, I just try to use that to fuel my like staying regular with it, because what's funny is like, I know that part of the reason why I injured my knee on that hiking trip was because I hadn't been able to lift consistently. It was like I had to stop lifting in like November, and then that knee injury happened in April. So it'd been like 6 months or so. Yeah. And like literally I know that it's like partly that my body was not really as conditioned as it was. Yeah. And if I had been lifting consistently all that time, I probably wouldn't have actually injured my knee as badly as I did.
Yeah. Right.
So I use that as fuel to like, even though I might still have little things here and there because my body is getting older, like it's not, for me, it's not a reason to step back. I mean, it is a reason to be mindful and especially to keep like, I think the biggest piece of that is like keeping up mobility work. Like stretching properly. Yeah.
Do you know who Joan Price is?
No.
Oh, okay. She's a writer. She writes on sexuality and aging. She's probably in her 70s now. She's written a lot of books on like senior sex, basically. And actually she worked with Jessica Drake to put out like part of the Jessica Drake's like education series to put out a movie on senior sex. And so
I love that.
Yeah, it was great. And I interviewed her and the seniors that were in Jessica Drake's movie for an old Peep Show episode. And one of the things that she said that I thought was really interesting is that in her 50s or 60s, I can't remember exactly when, she had a really terrible accident, like car accident. And the reason that she got through it was because she was a very consistent she had a very consistent exercise routine. So like that was kind of what helped her recover as an older person from this accident that she probably shouldn't have recovered in the way she did. And she was like, well, I was like fit. It's how I bounced back from this. So she talks a lot about movement, not in a fat phobic way or in like a weird diet exercise culture sort of way, but in a, because my body is fit, I can still do a lot of things that like I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Yeah,
exactly. And I love that. Like, that's how I think of it as well, is like, you know, regardless of what my body looks like or like what my weight or any other stat about me might be, like it's moving consistently, you know, in a way that like makes me happy. That just so happens to be powerlifting more often than it is anything else. But, you know, even during the time when I couldn't lift, I still, the way that I mostly stayed active was, you mentioned that you were a rower. Yeah. Like, I have a rowing machine in my basement. So that's when I'm not able to lift or whatever, like that's kind of my thing of choice. You know, it's kind of cardio, it's kind of strength. Like I'm never bored with it. So I think of rowing
I think of rowing machines as like torture devices, but that's because I was a rower in college. So we would have to do these 2K time tests, and our coaches would be like yelling at us, and there would be people like doing it and they would get off and puke. And I was like, oh my God. Like
that is very unlike how I use a rower. My version of using a rower is I put Bridgerton on the TV in the basement, and then I put that thing on the setting of 6, you know, like just the perfect little training resistance.
See, that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
And maybe I do intervals, whatever. Like I have like the fancy rower that has the app that connects my phone. So they like have little workouts in there. You can just like send to the rower. But I've never puked.
We just finished season 3 of Bridgerton, and it was so sexy. And especially because there was so many like fingering scenes.
I know.
And so when it was over, I was like, PJ, will you Penelope Bridgerton? Like they were like,
I love that.
Okay.
I love that so much.
Do it like that. That's what I want.
I'm also so down for the fingering scenes. Fingering is so underrated.
It is underrated, and they made it so sexy in that show, and you never see that. Like I don't see that usually in mainstream media, and the fact that like they emphasized it so much. I mean, you didn't see it, but you saw it. You know, it was clear that she was getting fingered all the time. Yeah. I was like, that's so sexy.
I love it. It makes me so happy.
I really liked it. What kind of suggestion would you give to people, especially like AFAB people who want to get into powerlifting and go in like you and don't know what they're supposed to do in the gym?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I'd like to recommend some of the fitness groups that I mentioned earlier, but it's not really like around anymore. Like, because the internet's a different place than it was when I was using that as a resource in like 2014.
Very sad. The internet, the trajectory of the internet.
I know. I will say like a really good resource potentially is powerlifting has become a far more popular sport in the last 6-7 years than it was, especially for women. I will say, like, so living in Louisville, Kentucky, like there's quite a community here of people. I mean, I think most of them probably go to the same gym I do because it's like the most well-known powerlifting gym in this area. But there's more than likely, if you're in even like a mid-sized city in the US, more than likely there's a reputable like training gym near you. So I would look there first. I would look locally and see if there's any gym that advertises itself as strength sports gym, meaning, you know, most gyms aren't like just powerlifting only. Like the one I go to is like powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting. They have strongman. They have CrossFit training in there. It's kind of like all the strength sports.
I was going to ask you what you think about CrossFit, because I feel like CrossFit's controversial.
I don't like CrossFit, and it's nothing against people who like to train that way. I think I don't really have a strong opinion. I've done CrossFit before.
I
I've been
tried
to
CrossFit
a lot of
too.
CrossFit training in my life. And depending on the gym I did it at, I either thought it was fun or I wanted to barf and leave.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is intense. I think that's kind of one of the most universal things about CrossFit. My personal dislike of CrossFit has more to do with the cult-like following that it has. You know, and like I haven't really found this is just for me personally, when I've gone to different CrossFit gyms, you know, I wasn't really looking to make it my main sport anyway. It was kind of like I went because I was invited by someone else and it was like a fun thing to do together. But I can't say that I've ever been to a CrossFit gym and thought like, yeah, I'd want to come here like 5 times a week. It's just, again, it's not for me. Like, it's not really the crowd that I feel drawn to. I think also just it
has kind of a bro culture. It feels like to me. Yeah.
Well, the thing, I think that this is kind of maybe the fairest thing I can say about CrossFit without even talking about like the different like cultural things and like how it's a little bit culty maybe. But like a lot of CrossFit competitions are like you're ranking against other people. So it's kind of, for me, the couple times I did go to CrossFit stuff, you know, I actually even went to a CrossFit competition. I wasn't competing. I was like watching the people compete, but it is very, very competitive and it's all like time-based.
Okay.
So it's very demanding. Like if you look at the world record holders in CrossFit, they're all like fucking insanely ripped Icelandic women and like Finnish women. So good for them. But like, I personally like don't. One of the things I really love about powerlifting is, although like, powerlifting has competitions and like there are records and those like you can win a competition in powerlifting, which means you're beat the other people in your weight class. But nothing about powerlifting to me, even when you're at a competition and you are actively competing, nothing about it actually really feels like you're competing against other people. It's not time-based, you know, it's like, here's the weight that you said you were going to lift at this competition. Can you lift it?
Yeah. So everybody
that is
like,
it's
rooting
very
for people to do the best they could do.
And it's really like everything about powerlifting is like, you're just trying to beat your own personal best.
Yeah. Right. I like
that. If your personal best happens to be, you know, hundreds of pounds heavier than the next person who ranked second place under you, well then, okay, fine. Like, you won, you beat them, whatever. But like, really, you're not competing against them.
Right.
When you train in powerlifting, you're not really like, I mean, I say that, but I think like maybe people who are at like the highest level, there's a certain point where like you want the world record in a deadlift. So you're like, I'm going to try to beat this specific person who holds the current record. But that's just, you're at such a high level of competition there. I'm just talking like your average like power.
Right. No, I appreciate that because I'm not a super competitive person. Like that's not my personality. And I like it when things are framed more as like, we want everyone to do as well as they could possibly do rather than competing against each other. And this is going to sound completely unrelated, but like my guilty pleasure is like all of the reality dating shows. Like,
oh my God. I need to catch up on the last couple like more new episodes of Perfect Match that dropped last week.
I haven't seen that one.
I'm very addicted to just specifically like all the Netflix dating shows. Yeah.
So I need to watch that one. But one of the reasons that I really like Married at First Sight is that like they're not competing against each other for like the partners and like everybody wants everyone to succeed. And there's something I'm like, oh, that's very nice. Like I want everybody to do well. Whereas in some of the other ones, I'm like, it creates this weird, I don't know, everybody's competing against each other. Yeah. So I like that in sports too. That's why I like individual sports because it felt like that in running too. Even though it's a race, like you're not racing against 10,000 people. You're like trying to do the best that you could do.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. Right though. The people who are trying to win are, but I was never trying to win. There was no way I was going to win. So you just work on your own goals. Yeah.
Same. I mean, for me with powerlifting, it's like, I know my best lift and all that. Like, I also know that I'm not competitive on the level. Like I'm not going to enter a powerlifting meet and like have a record of any, like I'm not going to be a record holder, you know, and that's fine. I don't want that. That's not a goal.
Yeah. Right.
But also that's one of the things I really love about the sport is like, no one else really cares either. No one else is like, oh, like you better, like no one gives a shit. Like, so it's very, it's like personal, like the goals you have, those are personal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very supportive community, for in my experience, which is really nice.
That is really nice.
Yeah.
So I like to end every episode with 3 questions. So what are you reading right now?
I'm not reading anything really at the moment.
You don't have to be.
I'm in the process of getting ready to move to Los Angeles. So I'm
really
like,
for good?
Yeah, like later this summer. So I've just been kind of, it's that thing where I'm like, now I gotta like declutter my fucking house and like, so I've been so overwhelmed with all that. I have a couple books at a time that I'm working on, but no, right now it's just like a list of things on Audible that I haven't even started. Yeah,
I hear you. What are you listening to? Either podcast or music or whatever.
Just like random 80s hits on Spotify has been my jam lately. Like really, like sometimes they're like deep cuts. Sometimes it's just whatever the fuck Bruce Springsteen song was popular in any given year. That's been my like get it done music lately since I've have had so much on my plate. Like that's the thing that will like get me going when I'm stressed and I have too much stuff to do is like just feel good tunes that I can like scream sing along to in my house. Yeah. And those just generally tend to be like a lot of 80s music.
Yeah. And what are you excited about?
Well, I'm excited to live in LA again. Yeah? I lived there for 3 years. Didn't you? Yeah, from 2012 to 2015. I lived in Studio City. Okay. So I'm going to be moving back later this summer. I don't know specifically where or even when. It's just kind of like there's a lot up in the air. It's the plan. So it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it mainly because I will no longer have to deal with having an absolutely insane travel schedule. Because for the last 4 years of my life, I've spent 3 weeks at home in Kentucky, 1 week in LA, 3 weeks in Kentucky, 1 week in LA. It's just been like, I'm just a little bouncy ball back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I literally just this like spring, I just hit a breaking point with it where I was like, I'm too old for this shit. Like, I want to live in one spot.
Yeah. Because I think the last time I talked to you, you had like a room in an apartment or something in LA that you would go stay in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is like, I actually really realized sort of like specifically like doing my taxes this year, inflation has gotten so bad. Like originally when I, started renting the house out in LA and like just flying back and forth all the time, originally I was like, no, this makes sense. I'm actually saving a lot of money. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But since inflation, it just has kept going fucking wild since, 2020, especially with regard to the travel industry, like airfare, car rentals, all the things that are just a part of my business overhead because I have to travel to work. Those things have skyrocketed in price and they've never come down. They just keep going up and up and up. And so that was a big factor in deciding to move is like when I really looked at my budget and realized I would actually, this sounds crazy because Kentucky is a cheap place to live, but I would actually save a lot of money if I just went and I could go buy a house in LA and I'll save money. That's stupid. That's how bad inflation has gotten.
I know that though, because sometimes like hotel prices, because I rent a lot of hotels, it is so crazy expensive. And I have looked at all those numbers too and realized like it would actually be less expensive for me to rent an apartment that I work out of all the time than to like rent hotel rooms, except that the nice places that I would want to do that in also have like doormen and all of this stuff that I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like that just is like a weird dynamic. But I've looked at that too, thinking like this has gotten so expensive when suddenly you're like, I just spent 20 grand last year on like, I'm like, that's a lot of money.
It is. It's really wild. I'm just like, I'm hoping that We'll see.
Yeah. But yeah, that's exciting though, because then it'll slow down your life a little bit in terms of not having to do that. Yeah.
I'm also like, I know it's like a little bit salty of me, but there's also a part of me that's like, you know, we don't know what's going to happen in this next election. And I'm also like, I am fine with like moving to a much more tried and true blue state than like Kentucky's kind of purple.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen with the state politics here. But I'm like, I don't know if Project 2025 actually happens and they decide to put all pornographers in jail. I don't know if I'd want to like be in a red state to figure out how serious they are about that threat.
I hear you. Yeah. It's scary. It is. Yeah. Well, it was so nice talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. I know. What like?
I know. I'm like, do we end on that note?
I just have to throw out like the worst little nugget at the end. Like, let's end on that.